Greetings! It is I, Tantus Narvan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our discussion within the world of darkness and Vampire the Masquerade, talking about the bloodlines and clans of the various vampires. We're going to continue with the next of the independent clans, the followers of Set. So the followers of Set, or Setis as they're known, believe that their founder was the Egyptian god Set himself. Now they follow the disciplines of obfuscate, presence, and serpentis. There are members among them that believe that Set will return to either rule the world or destroy it. And there are even those amongst them that work towards bringing this about. Now their clan weakness is that they take twice the amount of damage from sunlight than a normal vampire would. And they are in fact weakened within areas of bright light. They do have an advantage that a basilisk poison does not affect them. Now, when we talk about their founder, Set, the Antediluvian, there are many legends about them, and many pertain to, of course, Egypt. It is said that in those first nights, he existed within Egypt with basically his child Earth, his clan. And there are stories of him dealing with Ra, Horus, Osiris, various other ancient Egyptian deities. And there are those among the clan that believe these stories to be true, that these are stories of what Set went through, their founder. They had their rises and falls within the dynasties of Egypt during this time period that their power kind of grew and waned. But overall, they instilled themselves into Egypt. By the time Rome came, and we have that time period, we see that they have great power and many different cults within the area. They effectively split up into smaller sets of cults. And everything was looking very well to them until they suffered a major setback, a serious blow to their power within this era. In 33 ADE, Set disappeared. No one knows what happened, no one knows why, but he disappeared. And it was soon after that earthquakes rocked Egypt. And many of the old temples and places where they would have their meetings were either destroyed, crumbling into nothing, or sunk into the ground. This unfortunately meant that the sleeping Methuselahs went with those temples, many of them disappearing. It was up to Narthorken, one of the childer of Set, to basically take over the reins of the clan and keep it going. Now when we come into the Dark Ages, there was very few Setis that actually were in Dark Age Europe. They were still centered around Egypt. They began to see interesting cracks in their ways. They saw the first heresy, a first group that believed something vastly different than serving Set. This first heresy occurred in Constantinople under a certain group within there, and effectively they were originally kept in there. But with the fall of Constantinople, these vampires that had been sort of sealed in there spread out. They spread out to much of Europe and began spreading their influence. They were kept out of Egypt, which was unfortunate because that means that they weren't learning some of the older stories of Set and Setis, meaning that they were being basically shunned more and spreading their doctrines to other places in Europe. This isn't the only thing which affected them. European influence within the Middle East and Egypt was being kind of pounded in that area. The Setis did manage to make an uneasy alliance with the Assamites. The two of them vaguely hated each other and still kind of do, but during this time period they made an alliance that effectively kept the Europeans out. The thing is, the Setis saw the founding of Islam and the Islamic vampires as sort of insult to the belief systems that went towards Set. So of course they did not like them at all. Now the Renaissance and its learning period actually was a boon to the Setites. For at this point in time, we saw much more trade opening up and interesting beliefs. For trade, the Setis got into powerfully with the trade in the Orient and New World, basically giving themselves economic power. On the other hand, because there was now this leisure time, there were many within the leisure time class within Europe that began investigating old myths and legends and things like that. Hence where the Setites were basically able to put their information and had spread into Europe a little bit with this. Of course, still, their trade in slaves happened to be the most profitable thing they were doing. Now, the Victorian age continued this sort of spread. It saw that there was many within the Victoria area that were interested in ancient knowledge. So now, And it matched with these puritanical beliefs that sort of were existing within many religious cultures. So it drove these people into like looking for little ways that they could relieve themselves. So the vices and strangeness of these cults became more and more popular, spreading them across different areas. On the other hand, though, Egypt became occupied, so cities saw their influence within their basically home country become damaged by European vampires moving in. This didn't mean that they didn't spread. They saw them turn their focus towards the New World, and great amounts of cities basically began to focus and make connections within America. When we move into modern nights, we see the cities no longer so much focusing within Egypt. They do have a strong presence there, but many cities, both of Camarilla and some of Sabat, will see Seti's influence and cults appear in them. And because of their abilities, they're basically allowed. Many Setites actually will trade in information with the princes or the rulers of these cities, basically make deals with them. The information is good, but oftentimes the Setis will make out in the end. So this means that they're gaining this influence in other places throughout the world. Now, the Setites or the followers of Set are very locally driven when it comes to organizations. In any kind of city that they either have a founding temple or a main temple, and from there it spreads out in sort of a network within the temple or in the city or region. This kind of makes it that these are each their own small cult area within it. There are many different cults of Setites that exist. The leaders of these groups are called Hierophants. Hierophants are effectively the leaders of the clan. These are the elders who are said, or the Eternals as they're sometimes called, who are the ones that have been said to have either been a child of Set or have existed long enough to have seen him back in the old days. These are the most important members of it that effectively do rule over everything in a way, but it's sort of like each individual areas are kind of little links that each of them are linked up with, then a link to the main, sort of a network or a web that's being created. Now, because of the Seti's nature and that each basic cult or small group area, each temple can have their own version of the beliefs as long as they stick with the main thing, has caused many different breaks in it. There are many different variants within the clan itself. This isn't to say that they aren't actually a 3-caste clan. They were originally just like the Assamites, but only the priest class basically survives into modern nights. The warrior caste was replaced, which I'll talk about, and the witch caste basically went extinct. So this means that only one of the 3 castes exists today, unlike with the Assamite, where all 3 technically do. Now, the warriors of Glycin were the original warrior caste, which existed during the Dark Ages. They effectively exalted violence and looked to the philosophy of it. They, in fact, did not see the intrigue of the priests as betraying them and eventually leading to their downfall. Their weakness was, of course, being obsessed with power. Now, the current warrior caste, or warrior group, is effectively replacing the warriors of Glycin. These are powerful warriors that in modern days are basically trained as the assassins or bodyguards of the Setites. Unlike with others, if you are embraced by one of these, you effectively become a normal Setite. It is basically training. They replace obfuscate with potence, but to do so, they go through rigorous training since they are embraced, effectively showing off that the fact is not all disciplines are necessarily directly linked to bloodline. It also requires some training too. Now, the Wizards of Estra were a variant of the clan. It was one of the original castes, and they disappeared, basically went extinct in 1244. They used the disciplines of animalism, presence, and Seti sorcery. Now, the thing about these is they venerated this mother of monsters and looked to this basically serpent-like figure that they believed to be the originator of their clan, sort of replacing Set in a way. They actually did prophesize their own demise and the demise of the warriors. Didn't really do anything to stop it, though. Now, their weakness was that when they would go into a frenzy, their appearance would become 0. They would take the mantle of this mother of monsters, kind of become monstrous. And the fact is, if they used blood for any reason other than Seti sorcery, they had to use 1 extra blood point, basically giving it to Estra. Now, the children of Damballa replaced obfuscate with auspect, and they are said to be the forefront of the followers of light. Many of them are said to have had the haunted flaw and actually pass it on to their child. Now let's talk about the Serpents of Light. They're said to have their origins within African slavery, going to the West Indies. Effectively, it is said that there was a priest of Set that led a slave revolt within this group coming to this. The Europeans put them down, but the belief system that this follower put out became ingrained into a cult which existed beyond this revolution. So within the areas of the West Indies, this group basically came to arise. It was then, and it existed in various forms until about the 1960s, when it allied itself with the Sabbat. So we see that they have turned and seen that the Antediluvians in Set are basically a threat, that they should be eliminated and hunted down, that they are like dark gods that should be turned against. So they have radically different views than the original followers of Set. They are very heretical. They're also seen to be the basically Seti's anti-tribute, because they are the group that is now aligned with the Sabbat. We see that they have become a very powerful member of the Sabbat. They, of course, spread many of their cult temples along with Sabbat cities. They also are very strict within it. They go to many of the Sabbat meetings and participate in many of their rituals. We see that they are very loyal to it and following it. If there's a war band or something like that being called, some kind of call to action, they're willing and ready to jump in and join with it. Now, each Serpent of Light cell basically has a leader called a president, and above all of them is 4 elders called the Emperors. That's the kind of grouping within the variant of the clan that exists within the Sabbat. Now, they also revel in the battle, the jihad between the Camarilla and the Sabbat. It is the favorite thing of them to rile that up and get this combat going. They love getting into it. It's their version of corruption, is bringing forth the battle between these two. Now, the Daidia is another cult that basically went to India rather than stayed in the area, and they basically barely survived into modern day. Many of them thought to be extinct, but for a time period they did manage to find ways to survive in India, being followers of Set, almost seen as demon worshippers similar to the Bali. Now the fact is, they take a lot of Hindu and Buddhism basically tenets into their way. They believe in Kali as basically the deity to worship, as their version of Set. So they see you take out this obvious Hindu aspect to their ways. They actually are constantly trying to basically separate out from the followers of Set and become their own independent clan, but haven't gained that recognition. Now, Talkik are unique as they are very ancient variants of the followers of Set. They, in fact, replaced Serpetus with Protean. Now, when they use Protean, they don't take aspects of wolf, they take aspects of a jaguar. They effectively were powerful bases within the ancient South American cultures. Incas, Aztecs, Mayans, they were the major influence within among them. Venerating Tezcatlipocan, the god of darkness and sorcery within the South American cultures. Now, they were originally welcoming when the European vampires came, the Camarillan vampires, but found that they turned against them and basically tried to eliminate them. They then sided with the Sabbat, but the Sabbat eventually basically went against them too, and so they were nearly driven to extinction, thought to actually be extinct. There are still some of them that exist within South America today, and basically hidden portions of the country, using native South Americans as their stock for basically embracing more of their kind. The similarities between the originations Set and the changes that have happened with them into here are something that is fascinating for a number of Setis. Unfortunately, pretty much all of the elders of this group have been eliminated. So it's really hard to find out any information about them as to why they don't have Serpentis, why there's other differences between them, because the deity they venerate is very similar to Set himself, so you can see the similarities that might have existed. The Walid Set is actually the Arabian versions of the followers of Set. They are still worshippers of Set, but they are very much less devoted than the main clan itself, and finds that they are oftentimes at odds with the various Islamic vampiric groups within that territory. Now, the missions of the followers of Set can be summed up in one word: corruption. Corruption is what they seek to do. Corruption of kindred and mortal society as they like. And they use many means to it. Sex, drugs, vice, money, power. You name it, they will use, these are the main tools they use to bring about this corruption. They see corruption as this kind of way to a divine power, that effectively their spirit has moved on, leaving their body and mind in its place, and it's evolving themselves to this next level using this corruption. An interesting take on it, that it is divine itself within it. Now it has taken them some time to accept that they are effectively the same type of creature as other vampires. But they see it this way, that those are pawns of the other Egyptian gods or ancient gods, that they are more used as antagonists to the Cetes, that they're more servants of the underworld or other forces to interfere with them. Now, the Cetes is one of the 4 independent clans. It is in fact the oldest of the independent clans that can trace their line back to an Antediluvian. They were invited to join the Camarilla, but mostly that was ignored. Actually, to the race of the Camarilla. But nowadays, the Camarilla and the Sabbat both turn to the Cetes, oftentimes for various tasks and information. They have their uses, and the Cetes, the followers of Set, are great at complex intrigue, so these factions will come to them for aid in these matters. So they're seen almost as this necessary evil in the modern kindred society. So as I was talking about, the Cetes are made up, the followers of Set are made up of a number of cults. Basically, each of these cults spreads out from a founding temple, led by a Hierophant. From there, they come onto smaller temples, basically networking out one of these basically major dozen or so cults. Each of those is led by a high priest. But as you sort of spread out, so does the doctrine different between each of these. Each of these, basically the Hierophants, will lead their cult in a different way. Each of the high priests will lead things in a different way. We can see how things spread out and change as we go, as it splits from this main source into these various cults. Their immersion into the local culture is what starts to become some of these variants too, and we can see some of the changes that occur. Now, when you embrace into a Seti, oftentimes they take them from people that are in the actual cult, because they get mortals to be members of their cult, effectively like they always have. And they use this stock to basically embrace those, because once they are embraced, they already know many of the tenets of the cult, of the Setites. So they're already basically a big step on the way to learning what they need to. Now it's interesting that Cetes do not follow generations like other vampires do. They follow generations from Set. So you will see that when they talk about generation, it's going to be 2 less than it would be for any other clan. Now, this doesn't mean that other clan members, other vampires of other bloodlines and clans, can't become a follower of Set. You'd think that would be kind of antithesis of it, but as long as they effectively learn the tenets and join up and are basically devout, they're welcomed. They're welcome converts. These other vampires do not lose their clan. They do not lose their weakness. They still have those. But they are joyous welcome that they have seen basically the light of Set, the light of the teachings, and have been willing to join in there. Even elders are celebrate the fact that these come in here. They, of course, are taught Serpentis and Setite sorcery and put on the path of enlightenment, just like any other Setite that was embraced directly into the clan would be. There are, of course, rumors of other supernatural creatures, other supernatural beings, also being brought into the cult, into the clan in a way. So that's it for today. I introduce you to the followers of Set, who believe in corruption of mortals and kindred, to find their path to their divine awakening, all towards their great and powerful leader, their god, Set. Now, the Cetes themselves are masters of intrigue, masters of manipulation, using any purpose, anything necessary to get what they need. Whether it be, of course, sex, money, drugs, vices, just power in general. They're an interesting group that have eliminated some of their own variants over the years, but have spread many, because you see that there's variation in the very doctrines that have evolved variants in various parts of the world, various places spread out, because of each of these cults within the Setites basically can become their own thing in a way, their own version of the followers of Set. So while they are all seemingly united with very similar beliefs, they are in fact similarly divided too. A very interesting juxtaposition for a group that has a very powerful central tenet. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think are left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows support the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you go check out my Patreon, link in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.